that there's a very high percentage of people who have substance abuse problems who are in jails as well as in prisons. So that's evidence that people who engage in drug abuse are highly prone to end up in corrections.
Okay, and Dr. Poe, what we'll do, we'll take this first commercial break and we'll pick up where we left off. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. I've done for the day, and so it's just sort of.
I understand.
I'm just listening.
I understand.
I've been sitting in this chair since 10 o'clock this morning.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Is that right?
10 o'clock this morning.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, we supposed to have started at 10:30, but Mr. Obama was introducing the new Supreme Court justice. The nominee for that, and so they had a stream that came through here, and so we had to stop for a while. But we caught most of it, and then we started, and so this is the 5th show that we've done today.
He's very impressive.
Oh, yes, isn't he?
Very impressive.
And it seems it would be quite difficult for the people not to deal with that
that's
man.
Right, absolutely.
You know, that's,
absolutely.
Well, that's the way Mr. Obama is, you know.
He's a smart man.
That's right.
He's a smart man.
You know, if anybody can get it done, he'll get it done. You know.
That's right.
I always say he was the man that stopped the oil from flowing, and when he first came, when he came to office down in Louisiana, where they had the Gulf problem with the oil in there, and nobody thought it could be fixed, and he jumped right in there and came up with some kind of solution.
I see.
You know, but I think he's at least the ball is in their court.
Oh, absolutely.
Ain't no doubt about that.
Absolutely.
And ain't no use me asking you what you think about Mr. Trump.
Oh gosh, we're going. If he's elected, it'll turn back the clock
50 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's trying to. He says that. In the old days, we used to do it this way. But hopefully, he won't be. Stand by. Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. CPoe, and the topic is the relationship between mental illness and violence. And Dr. Poe, I think you gave us some information during that first segment indicating that there was a real relationship between mental illness and violence. And so let's pick up where you wish dealing with that topic.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say a word about mental illness. It's really a condition which involves a disturbance of one's thinking, emotions, and behavior to the extent that the person has difficulty in their relationships with other people and also in their social or occupational functioning. Violence, I think, at least from my perspective, is an act that does harm or threaten to do harm to another person or persons. And I also believe that violence it can be often or is often directed at oneself. Anytime I do something that I know is going to do damage to my body and therefore to my mind, to me that's an act of violence. So I believe that the research shows that people who are mentally ill, as I said, are often more the victims of violence rather than the perpetrators of violence. Now, there is a subset of persons who are mentally ill who are more prone to commit an act of violence, such as people who have symptoms such as paranoid delusions, thinking somebody's out to harm or hurt them, or people who have what's called command hallucinations, in which they feel voices are speaking to them, telling them to hurt other people and or telling them to hurt themselves, and people who have other psychotic disorders, which means they're out of touch with reality. Now, there are other factors that contribute to violent behavior other than just mental illness. One is poverty, the other is homelessness, the other is personal adversity, The other is if a person has a family history of violence, or if a person is exposed to violence in their home as a child, this person is much more prone to commit a violent act. If a person has been assaulted in the past, they're more likely to assault someone else. If a person has a parent or parents who have a criminal record, they're more likely to engage in an act of violence. But you know, I want to get back for a moment to violence directed towards oneself. A lot of behavior that people engage in is really acts of violence towards themselves. And of course, if I injure myself, I'm also indirectly injuring other people. For example, smoking does damage. We know it does damage to the lungs. It puts one at risk of developing cancer, lung cancer. To me, that's an act of violence.
And
if
yet
it's
people
ongoing.
continue to smoke.
Yet people continue to smoke. Excessive drinking is an act of violence. If it's excessive, of course, it does damage to the liver, to the stomach, and puts one at risk of developing other problems as well. Overeating, whether we might consider that violence or not, if you consistently overeat, then you're more prone to develop certain health problems as well. So there are many things that people do that are acts of violence that are normally not thought of as acts of violence.
Good.
So the thing about violence is that it's very broad. It's much more than just me assaulting someone or injuring someone or killing someone. It's a much broader concept. I'm reminded of what the scripture says. It says sin is lawlessness. And of course, breaking the law, the assumption is that you have committed a violent act if you break the law. And so I want to say again that people who are mentally ill are much more prone to be the victims of violence rather than the perpetrators. And as I said before, there are many other factors that contribute to violent behavior other than just mental illness.
What are some of the other factors, Dr. Poe, for example, that would contribute to mental illness outside of violence?
Okay. Well, I want to make a few comments about factors that puts a person at risk of committing a violent act. For example, if a person has a past history of violence, that puts a person at risk of committing a violent act, whether the person is mentally ill or not. If a person is a substance abuser, as we said earlier, that puts a person at risk of committing a violent act, whether that person is mentally ill or not. If a person has a personality disorder, that is a typical pattern of interacting with other people that's usually maladaptive, such as a paranoid personality disorder, such as a borderline personality disorder, and almost any other type of personality disorder puts one at risk of being violent. Now, especially if the personality disorder also involves another mental disorder, then that puts that person at fairly high risk of engaging in some type of violent behavior. Another factor that increases the risk of violence is excessive stress, especially the stress of being homeless, the stress of being divorced, the stress of losing a loved one due to death. These are the stress of unemployment. These are factors that increase the risk of a person being violent. Of course, poverty is another factor. So these are some of the other factors that puts one at risk of engaging in a violent act, whether that person is mentally ill or not.
It seems to me that a person who engages in such violence is really, as you've indicated, doing something that undermines him or her without, do they really recognize that? Is that a symptom of violence when you recognize that you're doing something wrong and continue to do it?
Well, I would say that yes. If I'm intentionally doing something that I know is doing damage to me or damage to someone else, then to me that's an act of violence. Let me just say that people who engage in violence are often in a state of intense emotion, and often that emotion is fear, or it may be anger.
Okay, and Dr. Poe, what we'll do, we'll take this final commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.